Hello and welcome back to Sprite Guard Plays HyperRogue. Today we are heading back out into a Yendor quest in progress, and so we are going to be on the prowl for an orb of Yendor, and along the way we're going to probably be focusing a little bit more on the game than we were in the previous part of this episode, though I do still want to talk a little bit about kind of the ideas that I talked about in the previous episode, and I don't know exactly how I want to approach it just yet, but it started out with my using this phrase that I heard from, I believe, somebody British. I'm not entirely sure who, trying to remember now, and it's like I kind of associate it with some of my friends. I don't know who it was actually. And I think that that's not really that important. I remember enough to know that I lifted this phrase that I thought was kind of quirky and interesting, and I was tying that into kind of the way that our culture treats people who we see as kind of other, and how we don't really give people the benefits that we ourselves see from from being in that other culture. That we kind of the benefit that I get from grabbing something from another culture is not actually something that's really afforded to somebody who is living in that culture, for whom it is normal. I think that's a big part of it, is my attraction to things that feel not normal, and I think that is kind of ties into my own feelings of being someone who is not normal, and for whom the strange is kind of appealing and comforting. And I'm wondering, why are we not seeing any orbs of Yendor? We should have everything that we need for it. I guess they are relatively rare, and so we're probably not going to see one for a while. Oh, and we don't actually have any dead orbs, and so we're going to want to get those before we actually go any further. And I have gotten quite an entourage behind myself while I've been sort of rambling without a lot of direction. I have not planned out this portion of the episode anywhere near as well as I planned out the previous one. I had a pretty solid idea of what I was going to talk about. And going into this one, mostly all I know is I want to pay a little bit more attention to the game. I felt like I wasn't really giving it enough attention, and I was really off in the stratosphere. But I also want to kind of summarize and sort of shore up the loose ends of what I was saying, because I went in some pretty far-flung directions, and I had a point when I started, and then I kind of strayed from that point as I got more and more into what I was saying. And I think that that's something that kind of happens occasionally. I mentioned earlier that I kind of plan out what I'm going to say by improvising, and kind of more what happens, to give a little bit more detail, is that I improvise, and then I find things in that I like, and I say, okay, I'm going to hit those during the actual recording. But then also, to fill in kind of the gaps between that, I improvise. And so it's this kind of mix of improvising and just kind of going over material that I have planned out. And even the stuff that I have planned out, I'm not really saying words exactly, usually not saying words exactly as I said them the first time. There are some exceptions. There's occasionally some little things I will say that I've planned out word for word. Like the whole part about being pear-shaped down to the molecular level was something that, I don't know, sometimes just kind of quirky little things like that aren't even all that funny, I find very appealing. It's like I find something that's not very funny funnier than something that's very funny in a funny way. I don't entirely know. It's kind of... I have this love of mediocrity that I don't completely understand, but I have this just deep love of things that are very apparently not all that good. And it's something that I have kind of only noticed in retrospect, and then as I've paid more attention to that, I've kind of been like, oh, hey, this is really cool, I really like this. And there's like this really consistent pattern in the things that I like. And so that was, kind of odd to find out, but it's something that I have more or less grown accustomed to, and now I know that I can find things I like by looking for instance, I watch a lot of Twitch, like a lot. And one of the ways that I find new people to watch is that I go to a game that looks interesting, or just a section that looks interesting, or even I'll just go on random, and I'll look for people with like 0, 1, 2, 3 viewers, people who are not very popular. And I would not really describe the people that I found this way as mediocre. I really enjoy their stuff. And I mean, that's kind of, it becomes difficult to talk about at that point, because it's kind of difficult to kind of separate my judgment of like, how effective are they at running a quality stream, and that's kind of getting into stuff where I don't entirely know. Like, I am not a master streamer. I know what I enjoy, and I know the really simple stuff, like I can tell whether or not someone has good audio. I can tell, how tight a ship they run, but I don't know enough to really make a coherent judgment about whether or not the people I found are quality or mediocre. What I know is that they're unpopular, or they're, not as popular as a lot of the other people that I've seen on Twitch, and that I have a really kind of intense love of what they do, and that there's no irony there is no, it's just, I love what they do, I love their show, and I really appreciate that, and I find it interesting that the way that I have discovered to kind of find people who I will really enjoy, one of the ways is by looking for people who are not popular, who are not running a stream that's... Well, it's difficult to even say, because there are people that I watch who are not popular, but who run very high quality streams that just haven't caught on yet. And then there are people who just aren't all that professional. There are people who are all that professional. Anytime, this is a problem that I have, that anytime I start to generalize anything, I immediately, instantly start thinking of counterexamples and ways in which the generalization doesn't hold. Now, we actually don't have enough dead orbs to make this journey yet, so we need to farm some more of those up. So yeah, I have, on the one hand, this really kind of sincere, unironic love for things that I can tell are not well made, and then I have this really kind of deep, passionate thing for things that just aren't very popular, and then I have kind of just this attraction to things because they aren't popular that I really kind of resisted admitting for a long time, but now have kind of accepted that it's part of the appeal. It's kind of like in wine and food tasting, there was kind of this whole conversation about how much of a role thinking that what you're eating is expensive plays in how much you enjoy it. And what they found out was that actually having an expensive label on a bottle of wine made it taste better. And people were, some people were like, oh, this is a scandal, they're just fooling themselves. But I think the conclusion that a lot of people came to, and the conclusion that I came to, is basically that it's part of the experience, that going in with a certain context, going into a bottle of wine with a certain context, is actually part of the whole experience of enjoying a bottle of wine. And it I think applies, I can certainly say with more comfort that it applies very much in food, that the context in which you get some food has a big impact on the overall experience and can change which flavors stand out to you and what things you notice when you're eating the food. And I know that, for instance, I just really sincerely like beverages better when they come in a bottle. And I really prefer food when it comes from a little kind of, again, going into my love of unpopular or kind of not great things. I really love it when food comes from a fairly sketchy restaurant. It could be like a truck on the side of the road, or it could be there's one place near my home that has some of the best food I have ever had in my life. But the presentation, it all looks like a sketchy dollar store. Like the front of it has that kind of tattered awning that says Chili's Deli Mart on it. And you go inside and all of the tables are like plastic picnic tables. And the food is amazing. And it's legitimately amazing food. I have talked to other people who have kind of confirmed my experience that this is really truly something special, but also getting it from a fairly sketchy place heightens the experience in a way that I was very resistant to accepting for a very long time, because I had this sense that it wasn't real enjoyment. And I think that that's something that is kind of a dangerous sort of lurking meme that a lot of people have, that certain parts of an experience are legitimate, certain kinds of enjoyment are more legitimate than others, and it's something that I have really fought against, partly because I have many likes that are kind of not perceived as legitimate, and so I did a lot of work to try and kind of justify these enjoyments. And then I had some, I did some growing, and I have kind of become more interested in shaping my worldview, kind of changing the way that I think about the world, so that I can think about the world in terms where this isn't like, take a guilty pleasure, and instead of saying, well, I enjoy this, but I kind of feel bad that I enjoy this, kind of approaching it from the point of view of, no, this is a legitimate part of the human experience, and it should be enjoyed. And I mean, there's kind of, my mind has this kind of tangled way of finding ways that anything that I'm saying might be wrong. And so now I'm immediately thinking, well, what if it's not ethical? Well, if it's not ethical, then it's not ethical. That's a different thing altogether. So this is in the palace. Getting a key from the palace, I think will be really interesting, but this is an area where I tend to get killed a lot. So we have plenty of dead orbs, and we will be avoiding rugs as much as we can, and just kind of checking along our route to make sure that we can get back the way that we are coming. And because we're not taking any rugs, we shouldn't have too much aggro. But we're pretty quickly going to be running into issues like this, where it's not immediately clear how we're going to get to the other side of this wall. And I may have to go outside of the range of where I can see my dead orbs in order to open up a path that will eventually lead to a place where I can see my dead orb. And so, let's see, here, for instance, I can see that opening up this screen plate over here will let me follow along this wall, left-hand rule, have to go quite a ways out of our way, but keep following the left-hand rule. Just think of those two red plates and that HyperRogue as a wall, and similarly for that rug on the trapdoor. And now we're on the other side of this wall, and we can open up with that plate. So our return journey will actually be a lot simpler. Now here I want to knock this guy, I believe, to the that direction, and then come around him, and then knock him into the pit there. And he may actually only have 2 hit points, but I think that fighting him that way is good to kind of, at the very least, reinforce the sort of the memory of knocking these guys, the kind of the patterns of thought that are required to get these guys into pits, which can be very valuable when you're fighting skeletons and when you're fighting the 4 hit point guards. So that's going to, again, kind of send us around a wall that we should be able to follow back to where we can see our orb. And now we're going into the Land of Power, and the Land of Power is actually a land that I cannot even get into right now. We just don't have anything that we need, and so we're going to have to turn back. But we can get all of our dead orbs back that we have left, so long as I remember how to get to them. And so now, how cautious I've been is kind of paying off, not paying off the kinds of dividends that I really wanted it to, but is paying off a little bit in that we could recover all of our dead orbs, and now we can just set off on another search for an Orb of Yendor. And it could be that by the time we actually find one that we can retrieve, we'll have enough dead orbs that we can go on a Camelot quest, and then it will kind of be, you know, the big question of, is this actually something that I want to do? Because, you know, it's something that would be challenging and that would be interesting for me to do, but it kind of brings up that question of, will it be fun? Will it be something that will be fun to record? I actually want to get rid of this ivy if I can. And I think I actually made my job a little bit tougher there. So this Orb of Yendor, we already have a sandworm that's going to be making it really challenging to get to that one. And then we're going to, I know we're going to run into more sandworms if we head into the desert, so I'm going to pass on that Orb of Yendor as well. It may be wise to go along the edge of a hive. There are still ways that it can go wrong if we chase the Orb of Yendor in the hive, but there's much more opportunity. Now, to go after the Orb of Yendor, or to go after the key, I mean, I keep getting that wrong, and I'm going to continue getting it wrong for probably my entire career, insofar as this is a career. It's like, I remember Nerd Cubed, who I talked about in the previous episode, one of his things was that he would use arrows to fire bows. Like, he always confused those two words, and to the point that, I think he even sold, like, shirts that said, "Your attention," and it had a bow and an arrow, and the arrow was labeled bow, and the bow was labeled arrow. And so, you know, there's always going to be those quirks of speech that, those things that we're going to constantly get confused. Maybe I'll improve, maybe I won't, I don't really know, but I don't think it's something that is that huge of a problem but it's always going to be something that I will notice and work on, and that can almost be more of a problem sometimes than the quirk itself. Like, a quirk is a quirk. It's not actually a bad thing. But the point remains that I don't actually... that there are... Let's see, what was my point even? I think it was that the hive is generally fairly easy to get a key out of. Oh, and that the vineyard, now that I'm seeing this, that the vineyard requires going through the temple, because we need orbs of fire, or orbs of the dragon, I mean, in order to actually be able to reach the key consistently. We could do it just by killing vine spirits, but that's so inconsistent, and there's so many ways that that can go wrong, that I really think it's better to look for the Orb of Yendor elsewhere. You know, maybe if we run into Relia again along the way, it might be worthwhile to get Orbs of the Dragon spawning. I think it may be more profitable to just go along the edge of the hive and look for Orbs of Yendor that might... Okay, this one's in the Mirrored Land, so that's actually really promising. I'm going to put, let's see, I'm going to put a dead orb right inside the door here so I know which door to go to. And I don't actually feel like I need to move that dead orb over there, directly above me, because it's right next to the orb we need to get to also. So now we're just going to... I like to have them like 5 or 6 apart. Actually, while I have this orb of... Oh, it wore off as soon as I said that, but I was going to say we should use the orb of speed to fight that eagle, but we didn't need to. Eagles... Oh, a single eagle is not that difficult to deal with. It's when you get them in groups that I just kind of fail. I'm just so bad at fighting them when they are in groups. I'm getting better at it, I think, because I kind of have them as this great nemesis of mine. I'm gradually learning ways of fighting them, and so I'm going to, little by little, get better at that. And I think as I kind of pay more attention to really trying to look around and check where my threats are, and what's coming in from the edges of the screen. I think as I get better at that, it's going to become less and less of a problem. Because you can always, as long as you notice them early enough, you can always manipulate the order in which they arrive at you just by moving towards them. And so I just need to be aware of them early enough that I can do that. And so that just requires playing slowly, carefully, like I say in almost every single episode. Slowly, carefully, and paying attention to what's at the edges of the screen. And, you know, I hope that maybe if I say it enough times, eventually I will start doing it consistently. But it may not be something that I ever get consistent. It may always be something that I struggle with. And a lot of difficult things in games kind of become not do you get it every time, but rather you just try and get it more and more often. Especially in very difficult games, like I've been really interested in watching Needle games, which are a little bit hard to explain what they are. It's kind of a long story, but they are basically the hardest games in the world. I mean, there are different ways that you can measure difficulty, and I made a post to a gaming subreddit kind of about whether or not it would even be possible to make a difficulty ranking scale similar to what they have for rock climbing. But Needle games are basically... so there's this game, I Want to Be the Guy, that was all about traps. And all about surprises, and kind of it was a very difficult game, but most of what made the game interesting was the element of surprise that, like, almost every place you went, something would kill your character in a just really outrageous and silly and unfair way, and that was a source of humor. And this game was really popular, had some really devoted fans, and people started making fan games that used the same art and the same or similar physics, and had kind of similar ideas. And so some of them were based around traps in the same way. Some of them were more about avoiding lots and lots of bullets on the screen, and those were called avoidance games. And then some of them were just about very narrow jumps through lots and lots of spikes, where you kind of had to thread the needle between, spaces where you might only have 1 pixel of room. And it involves doing things like bumping up against a wall so that you are on, the pixel that you're on is the correct, your speed is always 3 pixels per frame, and so the smallest distance you can move is 3 pixels. And so they've created these challenges where you need to bump up against a wall in order to change which of those 3 pixels you're on in order to make it through the jump. So incredibly precise, experts-only kinds of games. I was practicing one of them that is considered a 70 on a 1 to 100 scale, I think. So in the 60s or 70s somewhere. I was trying it out, and I was getting, like, the first jump sometimes, and the second jump every once in a while, and then I got the third jump once, and immediately failed on the 4th jump. And they have little save points that you go to that are sometimes fairly far apart now. I'm suddenly having anxiety about whether or not I've been working with these orbs, dead orbs properly, and I have. I've been making a good trail for myself, even though I got pretty far on a tangent. So I've been watching people playing these games. I've been really interested in kind of the kind of extreme challenge that these games present, that you have to do, multiple pixel perfect jumps in a row kind of thing. And with those games, a lot of stuff is really, like, you can't ever get consistent. I was watching, there are people who speedrun I Want to Kill the Camellia 3, which is one of the most difficult of these games that is widely played. And I was watching somebody who was doing a speedrun of this game. And so he's played it many, many times and was just trying to kind of get through it as quickly as possible. Now, normally a speedrun involves doing a lot of really crazy tricks to kind of take shortcuts that you shouldn't be able to reach. Like, you might make a jump that you're not normally able to make just by being very precise, and that will get you through. And then a lot of speedruns involve using glitches that can be very precise, like if you hit a wall in exactly the right place at exactly the right speed, then you can clip through it kind of thing. The speedrun of I Want to Kill the Camellia 3 is basically try not to die too many times. It's just you go through it, and then you make a mistake, and you have to go back at checkpoint, and eventually you progress to the next checkpoint, and it's just, how many tries does it take you to get to the next checkpoint is really what determines how well you do in that game. And speedrunning that game, it's not really, like, you can take a shortcut, and then, are you going to, if you save, like, 1 second on a shortcut and then spend 20 minutes on the next jump, like, that is not a gain worth making. And so, when I think about consistency, I really like to think about sort of where I am in the world and try and get different kinds of perspective. And so, when I'm thinking about this game and I'm thinking about the things that I really struggle with in this game, I think that it may just be, for me, one of those things that I never get consistent, but I gradually get better at, and I fail it fewer and fewer times, and I spend more and more time doing things that don't involve getting killed by eagles. And of course, as I get more and more confident fighting eagles, in the past, when I was starting this series, I would not even consider going after the Orb of Yendor in the Mirrored Land, because eagles were such a problem. They were so difficult for me to deal with. And, now I feel like the Mirrored Land is something that I can really take on, and I can get an Orb of Yendor out of it, even though I have 11 treasures from here. And so I actually have quite a lot of aggro in this area. I'm still really comfortable going through it, and I know that there is a risk, but I don't think that that risk is much greater than it would be in another land. I think this is one of the safer lands now for me to try and get the key out of. And it looks like we are very close to a victory, so I am quite pleased that we have made it this far. And we will pick up our dead orb. We will pick up this dead orb as well, just because I feel like it. And there we go. What did we get? We got, let's see, 31 shielding, 77 ether, 77 invisibility, and 150 time. That could be really valuable. I'm not sure, we don't really have, the circumstances that we need to really make use of it. I would really like to use it to preserve the Orb of Ether and do crazy things with the minefield. But I don't see a minefield around. If we go into the Land of Power, however, we're going to lose all of our orb powers once we leave it. And so I think the thing to do is actually to dash into this Red Rock Valley and see if we can use... Now let's see, will it go back? Yes, it goes back to preserving our Orb of Ether anytime we're not using it. And so it's only the Orb of Invisibility that is actually ticking down. And because we're invisible, the rock snakes can't chase us unless we're picking up items. 8, 9, and let's see, that will be 10. So now we just need to get out of here, and as long as we're not picking up items, we will be invisible. So we can be on our way, and it looks like we have found ourselves on a Hyperstone quest. So let's pick up some sapphires, and here we're going to have the same advantage. This actually lets us walk through the water as well. I don't want to probably play too loosely with it. Because I do want to preserve my ether charges as much as I can. But it's good to know that we can, if we need to, walk through the water. We have that extra avenue of escape. And it looks like we still have actually quite a lot of time charges left, even. We're going to stop being invisible pretty soon, but I think we're far enough away from any of the really severe hazards that I'm not too worried about that. And we only need 3 more sapphires. I'm going to probably be pretty... I'm going to stick pretty closely to my rule of there will always be more. I'm going to use our ether to get a little bit of speed advantage on some of these demon sharks. And I'm actually going to grab some winter. And that is going to have a really pronounced effect. It's going to save us, actually, a little bit of ether. But it's going to give us a little bit more maneuverability. And we're still probably going to end up using the ether to go through some water when it's really necessary. But it's kind of... And actually, we can use the ether then and the winter to freeze some of these ponds. And so that's so valuable, I actually want to go and grab another one of these Orbs of Winter. And we're really just looking for a crossroads at that point. Oh, we can actually fight these demon sharks, I think. Yeah, we can fight them. That's great. We were never able to do that in the past. Just because they were too... because they heat up the ice around them. They were just too dangerous. The ice would melt out from under us. That's wonderful. So now we can start gathering Hypersian rugs, and maybe we'll end up going on a princess quest. Things are really going remarkably. So I do still think that we want to find a crossroads, because I now want to save and kind of say, you know, okay, we've had a very successful run. Now let's save, let's take a break, and in the future we will just continue on the quest that we have been on. And of course, you know, now that we're in the palace, I'm kind of running into a lot of the same problems that I often run into here, but we only have one rug, so we're not having too much trouble with really difficult enemies just yet. Let's see. That will let me in here, which unfortunately will still not get me any closer to that crossroads. So we're probably going to have to look someplace else. Just not quite getting all of the green plates that I need to make something happen here. So just as I always say, there will be more opportunities, there will be more places for us to go. This looks like a crossroads type 2. So this may be some place where we want to move along through it and maybe go looking for a proper crossroads in one of these lands like the Hive, where we can traverse really quickly. And, you know, now we see, okay, there's a blue nest next to a red nest over here. Let's see, we have 55 blue after us now. We can sick them on these 45 red ones. So that's going to be not ideal, but hopefully we won't have too many red hyperbugs to fight. I think the blue ones will be lined up a little bit better, and so hopefully the red ones will be better able to defend themselves, and we can just pick up, I think that's going to get us, let's see, 7. That's got us up to 7, and so I did not realize the red hyperbugs had such a strong home field advantage that we have 8 blue hyperbugs still after us. And so I think the thing to do is to sick them on these red hyperbugs and then just run and see if we can get out of... There we go, we got out of aggro range. And so that has gotten us free of the hyperbugs that were pursuing us, but we still have not made it into a crossroads. Let's see, we have 11 fern flowers, we're done with those. What's this up here? Relia. We have not actually completed Relia, and so that might be something worth doing. I had talked about maybe doing it before in order to unlock the temple and do the grimoires, because what we'll get from that is the Orb of the Dragon, which will make us much more able to clear the vineyard, and will actually give us some power against rock snakes, which, even though we have already gotten the Red Rock Valley done, having that available as one more tool in my toolbox will be very valuable, because if you remember the previous episode, I was not actually in a Red Rock Valley. I was not trying to get red gems when I was killed by a rock snake. And so that is something that I am very aware of as a kind of a threat that I'm going to be thinking about, and so having more tools to take that on is going to be a benefit. Now let's see, we have 8 of these? Yes, now 9. And so we only need one more, and I want to look for a crossroads rather than go diving straight into a temple, because I do want to save. We've done a whole bunch of stuff. I do want to take a break. We've been going on for quite a while. I'm not sure how long. I don't have a timer in front of me, but we've been going on for long enough that I'm actually going to take a risk and dive into, not a huge risk, dive into the Land of Eternal Motion in the hope that I will be able to find an orb of safety, but it looks like we're going to find our way to a crossroads more easily. And orbs of safety are pretty common in the crossroads. That's an orb of storms, so not that one, but here's one over here, so we can get to that pretty easily. And so that is where I'm going to wrap this one up. In the next episode, we will continue on a Hyperstone quest. Since we have a hive right here, assuming everything loads up looking the same, we will probably head into the hive to get the last 3 royal jellies that we need. We will also finish up getting the Hypersian rugs, and look at maybe going on a princess quest, though as I mentioned in the previous part of this episode, that's been going so badly that I think that there's probably a lot of stuff that I want to do before then. I would even say that I've been having more success with the Whirlpool than I have been with the Princess Quest. So that is what is coming up. I hope to see you next time, but most of all, thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.